Welcome to Own the Season podcast. We will talk to industry insiders along with outdoor enthusiasts to help you own your season. Now let's join hosts Art and Michelle Helen with Brad Jones. Own the Season podcast is sponsored by Griffin Armament, the oldest privately owned silencer manufacturer in the United States. Go to griffinarmament.com to learn how you can get a silencer shipped to your door. Griffin Armament, engineered silence.
Hello and welcome to Own the Season podcast. I'm Michelle Helen along with Art Helen, and today's guest is Adam Hayes. Hi, Adam.
Good morning.
Good morning. What have you been up to? Doing any hunting?
Oh, yeah. Haven't been out every day. It's been awfully warm here in Ohio, but been picking and choosing the right days and have a couple good deer I'm watching here at home, and actually thinking about heading to Illinois here midweek. Got a big deer over there to chase, so getting to be that time of the year. The last 10 days of October is always my favorite week of the year, so pretty excited about it with this cold weather.
Yeah, same here. We've been also not hunting every day because we've had some really warm weather here too since season opened, but a little bit of a cool down now, and then same here, looking around that before and after Halloween time to getting pretty good for us.
Absolutely.
You got anything else in the works besides there at home in Illinois?
Yeah, I am supposed to be making a trip up to Canada sometime. I'm kind of waiting for a deer to show up on camera up there in Alberta. And then I've got a trip planned for Texas, probably the first week of December. And then I've also got a Kentucky tag, waiting on a deer down there to show up as well. So I've got plenty of tags to choose from.
Awesome. Good for you.
Trying to put, what number is that now for 200? How many do you have?
I've shot 4.
Okay, so looking for number 5.
Yeah, I haven't seen a deer that I think would crack 200 inches yet this year, but always on the lookout.
Yeah, you never know when that one's going to show up. It's amazing when all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've seen everything there is. I'm assuming you do too, but I run a boatload of cameras, for a lot of different reasons, not only to see what deer are there, but to look at patterns and research things from year to year to year and see how things are. And it always amazes me that, you can put 5 cameras in a 2-acre area and the deer you get on one camera that you don't on a different camera. And it's like, really, that deer should be showing up here, and here, and they don't. Like I've got one area where I've got a camera on a water hole and a camera on a food plot that are literally a couple 100 yards apart at the most. And you can see deer on the water hole and nothing on the food plot, or, there's certain bucks on the water hole and certain bucks on the food plot, and you barely ever see them vice versa, which kind of surprises me because you'd think, there it is. But, there's a lot of things, and Michelle will laugh at this because I know that there's a lot of deer that get by that you don't know that are there, but I put so much into the cameras and say, oh, there's not a big deer there, and all of a sudden, boom, this big buck shows up out of nowhere.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. My backyard is basically a big food plot, and it's only a few acres, and I've got 7 cameras set up back there, on every trail coming in and out of the yard, and it never ceases to amaze me that I'll have a really good deer come through, and I'll only pick him up on one of my cameras when he should have walked by, 4 or 5 of them.
Right.
So yeah, those big deer have a knack of being able to avoid cameras, and it's debatable. I'm sure everybody's got their own opinion on if these deer, how these deer react to cameras, if they're detecting something, whether they see something, hear something, or sense something, and then they start avoiding them. It's just you just never know. And you definitely don't want to get into that situation where you're basing everything on cameras just for that simple fact that big deer really can seem to avoid them no matter how many cameras you got set out.
Yeah, and that like you just said, it's amazing and always has amazed me. I've watched and done a lot of research on cameras and stuff, and because everybody has their, you can't put it at eye level. You got to put it way up in a tree. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I'm like, I think a lot of it, to be honest, looking at the research over years that I've done and some other people, is, when you first buy a camera, if you grab that thing, I don't care if it's Walmart or where it is, Farm or Fleet Farm or Cabela's, or you take that out of the package, if you smell that, it smells like injection molding. They stink. Mm-hmm. And so I'm one that if I get a camera, that thing is going to sit outside. I'm going to, pressure wash it or something, and then it's just going to sit there for a while before I even put it up. To try to get rid of as much of that scent as possible, because all cameras make a little bit of noise. They all click, they all do something, whatever, or there's something that's, you put it in an area that's new. It's just, I always tell people, you walk into a house and you put something on the kitchen table and leave. When you come back in, whoever wasn't there when you put that on will notice that more than likely, because it's something new. And it's just like that in that deer's bedroom. It's new to them. And then if it stinks on top of that, they're going to check that out and they're not going to like it. So, that's when I look at that, I'm like, take care of your scent, take care of other things. And you're going to have better luck with those cameras. But that's my opinion. As you said, everybody's got opinions on what's going on, whether it's the noise, whether they see it, whether they, and they say it scares big deer. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've got so many pictures of big deer on cameras that continually get pictures of those deer that I have a hard time believing that it pushes them completely out of the area.
Well, I started spraying my cameras down this year just for the simple fact that we've always had problems up in Canada. I mean, because I go up there spring and fall. I bear hunt up there every year, deer hunt every year, and bears. I'm pretty sure that a bear's nose is better than a whitetail's, and you cannot set a trail camera out on a bear bait without a bear coming up and messing with it. And once we started spraying cameras down up there, it was like it went from, not being able to use them or having to put them in some kind of box to they don't even mess with them anymore. Just by simply spraying them down with, we started using scent thief up there, and bears don't even mess with them anymore. And we started using them for cameras for deer up there, and I started doing it here at home too, and haven't even had a problem with it since then.
Yeah, it's you try to do that as best you can, but and it's little things, and I think that, and you can probably attest to this, that they say, what is it, 10% or 15% of hunters are the ones that are consistently killing good deer and big deer. But I think out of that 10 or 15%, that 10 or 15% is doing it because they are not only consistently shooting big deer, but they are consistently doing the same thing as far as watching the wind, as far as scent control, as far as, tuning bows or guns or whatever. I think that they have a pattern to stay as undetectable as possible. And I think that helps a lot with success.
Yeah, you talk to anybody that's consistently successful on big deer, and they've got a system that they go by, and it works for them, and they stick to it, and it's proven to work in their area. And yeah, it's never just one thing. It's a system, it's a process, it's multiple things that guys do that have through trial and error, you develop a system that works for you. And yeah, I would agree with you 100%.
Well, and there's just so much that, there's always going to be elements that we can't control when hunting, especially, fair chase, wild animals, which is what we're talking about. So it's a matter of like preparing and having a plan and doing what you can to control the variables that you can to raise that chance of success. So we talked a little bit about the weather, and we're kind of all excited about maybe some cooler weather moving in and where we are, and looking forward to the end of October here, and that cameras are a great tool that we have available, but not just solely using cameras to make decisions about when or where you hunt. Talk to us about moon guide or looking at moon phase and position and picking when you're going to spend more time in the woods.
So for me in particular, I'm normally hunting a specific deer, and the first thing that I'm looking at is wind. I mean, when I quit hunting winds that were good for me and started hunting winds that were good for the buck that I was after, that changed my success dramatically. I mean, we all put in a bunch of time locating a good deer to hunt and scouting them and finding the best place to kill them. You've got to be in the right place at the right time. And I believe the right time is when you give the buck the wind to his advantage so that he feels safe enough to move before dark. So I just completely turn the tables and I give a buck the wind that makes him feel safe, makes him feel comfortable enough to get up. You just got to be able to find a location on his travel pattern where you can get within bow range of him while they're using the wind to their advantage. So the first thing that I'm looking at on a spot where I'm going to hunt is going to be the wind. And I'm normally splitting hairs because I'm giving a buck the wind to his advantage. So it could be a matter of that wind shifting, 10 or 20 yards one way or the other could be game over for me. I mean, sometimes it's that tight, but first and foremost for me is wind. And then the second is going to be, I either want a good red moon evening where the moon's peaking overhead or underfoot right at prime time, which is going to amplify activity, or a good weather pattern, because everybody knows there's certain days each month, just like right now, first cold front of the year, deer are going to be moving. The weather's going to trump everything. But there's also a handful of days each month where the moon trumps everything. And when you have those evenings where that moon is peaking right at prime time, it's going to increase activity for all deer. I mean, most of your deer herd, your does and your immature bucks are going to move pretty much same time every day regardless. But when you're starting to talk about a 4, 5, 6-year-old deer that has, learned the game, he knows that moving before dark, he's taking a chance on his survival basically, and everything that he's learned he's learned to stay put until after dark. But on those evenings when you have multiple factors that line up that are going to increase the chances of that deer moving, I think it's all about the wind, but you need to combine that wind with either, like I said, a great evening for the moon or a good weather pattern that's going to increase activity. So I'm looking for a combination of two of those factors. If you get a night where you've got the perfect wind, a good red moon evening, and then a weather pattern that increases activity on top of that, and all three things line up on the same night, that to me is the perfect storm for killing a big deer. And when you have those three things lining up on the same hunt, that's when things get bloody. So I'm looking for a combination of those factors. And then basically the only other time that I'm going to go into one of my spots where I know I need to be to kill a big deer is going to be if that deer is showing up on camera in daylight. Then it doesn't matter what's going on. I mean, you got to get aggressive and go in and kill them because they're making a mistake in daylight. And that's the time where you kind of throw everything else out the window and you just got to take advantage of that situation. So like I said, for me, it's going to be a combination of the wind and the moon, the wind and the weather, or all three, or if that buck is making a move in daylight and I've got him on camera, or actually see him making a mistake in daylight.
Yeah, it's
Art, you've had that that ladder situation. I know we've had that with certain bucks in particular, and even deer that have shown up for a limited period of time on our property a couple years in a row. Like a deer that we don't see throughout the the early fall, and then shows up on camera on our property and only sticks around for 3 days, for like 72 hours, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And then like you said, getting aggressive and maximizing time spent in the woods there.
Yeah, definitely we get aggressive when that happens, as soon as I look back through cameras and I'm like, hey, this buck, maybe I haven't seen it yet on camera, but I'm like, this is a good deer and he was there the last couple years, which should put him at a 5-year-old. We need to be there on those days, and try to figure that out and get aggressive those days. But other than that, I used to be, when I was younger and stuff, I used to be more aggressive all the time. It was like, okay, season starts tomorrow, and now I'm going to go out and I'm going to hunt every single day, and just jump stand to stand to stand, depending on the wind. But I'm going to hunt because my success is always depends on how many days I put in the woods. That's what I truly believed. Now, as I get older, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but now as I get older and harvested a lot more mature deer and big deer, I look at it and say, all right, I want to hunt these deer when they are like an hour, every night they get closer to being daylight or something, instead of going in there and just say, oh, maybe it'll screw up. No, because I'm putting too much scent. I'm putting too much time. I'm burning those areas out. So I'm going to wait until, like you said, till certain things align. And then hunt it instead of burning myself out and burning those spots out. And I don't know how you feel about that. If that's, kind of your thought process, or do you just go in and let's do it, or I'm only going to hunt when things align, or like you said, get aggressive only when that deer's there. But if he's not there daylighting but getting closer, then do you sit back and wait and say, I'm just going to wait and hope he screws up when all the stars align, and not put the pressure on him?
Well, I think everybody would probably agree that the best chance of killing a big deer is the first time you set a stand, because every time you go in and you don't get it done, the game just keeps getting tougher and tougher and tougher, because he's going to eventually end up picking up on some of your scent you left behind, or catching you walk out after dark with a flashlight or headlamp, or hear something. They're going to pick up on something eventually.
Right.
So I think your odds go down drastically every time you go in and you don't kill them. My ultimate goal is to try to get it done the first time I go in, so that doesn't happen. So I'm, I kind of call it being persistently patient, and I wait till, when I have the deck stacked in my favor, when everything is, odds are stacked against that deer, or for me, for that deer to be moving, and when you combine multiple factors that are going to increase the chances of them moving in daylight, that's what I'm waiting for. I tell guys a lot of times that the toughest part of hunting a big deer sometimes is actually not hunting him until you've got everything stacked in your favor. And I'm not going to advocate for anybody not to hunt. I hunt almost every day, but I'm not going to dive into my best spots consistently, because you're just going to end up ruining the spot. I want to wait until I've got my best chance of killing that deer and going in the first time and getting it done. And that's why I'll wait till I have a bright wind, combined with, the right moon or good weather pattern or a combination of all of them before I'll go into my spot and hunt it. Because, like I said, the more times you go in and you don't get it done, the game just gets tougher and tougher, and that deer is going to probably end up patterning you. Now, I'm curious, when you guys talk about having deer show up for, a few days and then being gone, have you ever gone back and compared those dates on those trail camera pictures and compared them to the red moon? Because normally that's the light bulb moment for a lot of guys that are skeptical about the moon and the red moon's impact on mature deer moving during daylight. And that's why we offer a free version of the app, so that you can go back and compare, your notes, compare the days when you've killed your best bucks, or the days that you've actually gotten daylight pictures of mature deer. And when you start comparing those dates and times to the red moon, that's usually, like I said, the light bulb moment for people that are like, wow, I'd never realized, never paid attention to this. And here's the proof right here in front of me. I've killed, these big deer on the red moon nights, or I finally got a daylight picture of this buck that, hardly ever shows up, and then bam, here he is in daylight, and it's right on the red moon. I mean, it's not 100%, nothing is, but like I said, most of the time when people go back and compare the two, they're really shocked at how accurate it can be. And like I said, that's why we offer a free version that just shows the historical information for the red moon, so that you can go back and compare your notes and see if it lines up or not.
I'm going to say that we probably haven't done that, and for a couple of reasons. I mean, it was the situation that is most in my mind, a particular deer was more like, plus or minus a few days, right? It was like first week in November or something like that, right? But the main reason I would say, like, no, like we haven't looked or didn't look at that, is it's me that's more looking at moon phases and taking interest in that and looking at that, whether it, especially for hunting. I'm also looking at information like fishing as well, and looking at like majors and minors and things like that. So we'll have to do that with the free version and look at that. That is interesting. That would be interesting to see historically.
Now, the moon guide really doesn't focus on the phase of the moon, and that's a misconception with a lot of people. It's more about the position of the moon in the sky, because every day as the moon rotates around the earth, there's 2 times every day where the moon is actually closer than any other time of the day and has the most gravitational pull, and that's your overhead and underfoot moon, when it's either straight up or straight down. And that's the exact same thing that triggers the tides to come out on those 2 periods, because it has the most gravitational pull. I mean, we're talking about a force that's strong enough to move the oceans. It's that strong. See, nobody's ever going to convince me that something that's that powerful doesn't affect animals and fish to feed. I mean, if you talk to anybody that does any amount of saltwater fishing, they base everything on the tides, which is the overhead and underfoot moon. Exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of diehard fishermen do the same thing, whether it's saltwater or freshwater. And I mean, if you look at the record books for trophy fish, more than half of them are related to a lunar influence. And I've done some research on the record books for whitetails as well, and it's pushing, I'm not going to say it's half, 50%, but it's getting pretty close to that, where nearly half of the bucks recorded in Pope and Young were taken on a red moon. So I mean, that's pretty significant. And like I said, when it comes to hunting big deer, it's all about trying to predict what he's going to do before he ever does it. I mean, that is the game that we're all playing. So how are you able to predict what he's going to do before he does it? You go by your trail camera photos, you go by historical information, you go by when that deer has shown up previously. So when is going to be my best time to try to be there to intercept him? Because once I have a picture of him, he's already been there if you weren't there, and it's too late. So if we're trying to predict what he's going to do before he ever does it, sure, you could look at the weather, a day or two or maybe a week in advance, but that's about as far as you can go with the weather accurately and the wind. The moon is something that you can look at months or even years in advance, for somebody that's going to try to plan, their vacation time, where they've got to put in, for that vacation in January for the following season, or a guy that's been saving up for years to go on a big game hunt or an outfitted hunt, and they're looking at, a year or two down the road. Why wouldn't you at least look at that information and put yourself in a situation where you've got your best chance for activity for that 1 week? And the moon is the only thing that you can predict that far out.
Right. It's that's something good to look at. And like Michelle said, she looks more at the moon, in the moon phases, and
in position. I am.
Position.
I mean, I said phase, but I am really looking at the times.
Right. The times really and where it is. I mean, she's kind of a science nerd with that stuff. And I've
been following it for, over 30 years now. I mean, there's definitely something to it. I mean, I've personally seen it happen so much that I know it's more than a coincidence. And, owning the Moon Guide, I talk to hundreds, if not thousands of guys every year, that have been paying attention to it and following it for years and have killed their biggest bucks ever on the red moon. And like I said, I'm not going to sit here and try to blow smoke and tell anybody that it's 100%, but sometimes it's scary how accurate it can be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like anything else. It's just a tool to use and to help you be successful, just like the wind, just like the weather, just like anything else that you buy. This is going to be my 45th year hunting, and I'd like to think that I've been consistently successful for a couple reasons, and one being that I never stop learning. I feel like I'm still learning every year, and I listen to especially people that are successful on a consistent basis as far as what they do and how they've been successful, because whether or not it can adapt to, my tactics or where I'm hunting at, you just never know when you might pick up one little thing that's going to help you. And when it comes to hunting, mature deer, it's always those little things that you pick up, and paying attention to those little details seem to make the biggest difference.
Right.
So I'm always learning. I'm always listening to everybody, whether you take their advice or not. I'm always looking for that one little thing each season that I can pick up that's going to make me just a little bit better. Like I said, at the end of the day, sometimes it's always those little minute details that make the biggest difference at crunch time. So.
Yeah. And there's always somebody who's done a little more research or done something that you can learn from. There's not everybody is perfect. Not everybody is great. But everybody has something to share, I believe.
Sure.
And a lot of people, think that, these guys, kill big deer, they're untouchable. Most people aren't untouchable. If reach out and ask questions, and it's not like, I'm going to have secrets, and obviously you're not having secrets because you're on here, talking, doing your thing. And, I think, like you said, you've got to be ahead of that animal. You've got to be able to predict it and do these things. And I was fortunate enough here in Wisconsin to be part of the collaring program for the CWD predation studies. So I got to collar or be part of the process of collaring over 100 different deer. I got to see the studies from that, where these deer traveled, what they did, what days they travel, all these different things. The thing was I could never see until after the season was done, right? DNR's like, no, you can't. I'm like, yeah, but I got this one really good buck. I would need to know her. And they'd be like, yeah, no, Art. It doesn't work that way. And just kidding, because I was, to me, then that doesn't become fair chase. But I was, really interested in that program just to learn about the predation, learn about how these deer travel, and was kind of amazed as when they get older, how their home range begins to shrink as they get older until a certain time, and then they move on. And I believe that once it gets to that, they become a little bit more predictable. They're still not predictable. I think they're a little more predictable, but they're harder to hunt because they've seen it, been there, done it. So now, they understand if something is out of the norm in their bedroom. They can sense it. They have that sixth sense now, because they're older, but I believe they're more predictable. And I use as an example my dad. Love my dad dearly. He's in his 80s. And I said, if I was ever going to hunt my dad or needed to know where my dad was, I said I would put a tree stand in the Quick Trip parking lot, because I know that at 7:30 in the morning, my dad is going to be at Quick Trip to get his coffee and a donut. He's just become that predictable that's what he's going to do. And
it's amazing. It's amazing how similar a big old whitetail is to an older guy.
Right.
Because when you get to be, I'm 58 years old, and my biggest concern these days, every day when my feet hit the floor, is how to keep my butt out of trouble and safe.
Yep.
That's my biggest concern. And you get a big old mature buck, and he's the same way. His number one concern is safety and not getting killed.
Yep.
They're not huge breeders anymore. They still participate, but they're not roaming the countryside, like they used to in their younger days. They're more confined. And I agree with you 100% that an older a buck gets, the smaller his core area gets, the smaller his range gets. And it's very similar to hunting the October lull, because people struggle hunting the October lull because, like you said, they're doing the same thing every day, and they're very predictable, but they're doing it in such a small area that it's next to impossible to get into that area and take advantage of it without tipping them off.
Right.
And that's the way a big buck's home core area is. It's very small. He knows it, like the back of your hand, and if anything changes, they pick up on it instantly. So it's a very difficult time to hunt because, like I said, they're doing the same thing every day. They're so predictable and so killable then, but they're doing it in this tiny area, and it's so difficult to get into that area without tipping them off. It's just that's really difficult, and that's how a big buck's older life is. They're doing the same things year after year in this tiny little area, and it's difficult to get in there and kill them without them knowing what's going on.
Right. Well, you look at back in the old days, like, Miles Keller, is a friend of mine, but, you look at Miles back in the day, and he would get into some of those core areas, and he would just stay up and he would sleep overnight in his tree stand. Which if you're not hunting at night, and I still know a lot of guys that do, they sleep overnight in their blinds, because that deer is coming in at, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning when it's, like right now, if it's light at 7 in the morning, so they're there a half hour afterwards, but they're somewhere close to that. They're already someplace close. So if you try to get into that stand 20 minutes before sun comes up, you're probably going to bust that deer, and you're going to educate them. So if you're in there already, and these guys stay overnight so that they're there and not educating it in the morning as it tries to come back through. And they're being successful that way, which, again, is 100% legal as long as you're shooting it during, legal light. And that's you know, some of these guys, that's what they do. And because it is so hard to do that, some people just can't do that. I mean, I'm a big dude. I could probably sleep in one of my blinds, but sit in a tree stand and that just wouldn't be a good deal for me. You know, and I'd snore and scare it away anyway. So it doesn't really matter. But
I think some of the best stuff that Miles Keller ever wrote that I've ever read personally was in the book Moonstruck that Jeff Murray had wrote back in the, I think it was in the late 90s, and Jeff was the original owner of the Moon Guide,
yep.
Which is a different story, but Miles had a couple chapters in there about his strategies and in particular how he hunts from the outside in, and that has been a staple for me for the last 30 years, whether it's during season or even in summer, is how you hunt from the outside in, and you know, it's observation stands that are 200 or 300 yards outside of where you need to be, just watching and learning and trying to find out what that deer's doing, and just inching closer and closer and closer until you finally know the exact tree that you need to be in to kill that deer, instead of just busting right in, hanging a stand right over the best sign that you can find and hunting it, and probably, you know, educating that animal before you kill him. You know, he was a stickler when it came to staying on the outskirts of a buck's territory, you know, watching, learning, trying to pick up on things, trying to see what that deer does, how he moves with the wind, and just inching closer and closer until he finally knew the exact tree that he needed to be in, and then he dives in and hunts.
Right.
And, you know, I've used that for my summer scouting. I use that during season. You know, I think I probably scout more than I hunt during season, just because of that fact that I want to know, you know, I want to know where I need to be before I actually go in there, you know, instead of just, like I said, diving right in and setting up over the best sign. I would rather watch an area and see that deer and see what's going on. You know, you can pick up on so many things from just sitting back and watching an area. You could think you know the exact right spot to be in, but you sit there and watch it, and then you see how the other deer move through there that might end up, you know, blowing the whole thing up for you, that you didn't even, you know, think about or witness. You know, animals coming through a, you know, downwind of where you think you're wanting to set up. It just, yeah, it's been a big part of what I've done, and that stuff that he wrote back in the day about that was just priceless.
Yeah.
Yeah, and still, you know, spot on and relevant today.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, I think like seeing, like, scouting with your own eyeballs live, I don't think anything's going to be better than that. I do think that perhaps some of what Miles wrote about, you know, that was obviously, like, probably, I would think, before, like, we had the technology that we do now in the trail cameras.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think trail cameras, especially the cell cams, is another tool that can help with some of that, you know, scouting from the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what I would do without my cellular trail cams these days.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the art of scouting is kind of being lost with the new generation, you know, the woodsmanship of it because of trail cameras. You know, fortunately for me, I was brought up with a father that bow hunted and learned woodsmanship at an early age, and just, I was a sponge when it came to learning and reading about, you know, how to do all that stuff when it came to scouting and that sort of thing. And there's nothing that can replace, you know, boots on the ground, walking your area and scouting and firsthand knowledge. And, you know, kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier with all these different studies. I mean, I've heard every story, I've heard every comment about all these studies and how, you know, studies prove that the moon has no impact on deer activity. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and talk bad about these universities and these studies that are done. All I'm going to say is I personally haven't seen a study done on just the mature bucks in an area. Because if you think about it, we're really all after 2% of the deer herd. The biggest bucks in an area, which is probably, give or take, it's about 2% of what the deer herd is, the oldest, most mature bucks. And then we're also not talking about this huge migrational movement pattern that's going to show up on a study. We're only talking about, a buck getting up a couple minutes earlier than normal and maybe moving less than 200 yards from his bed to his food source. I mean, I'm sure things are probably a little different up there where you guys are at in Wisconsin. It's on a bigger scale, but I've hunted everywhere between Ohio and Alberta. And what I've witnessed is big mature bucks are not moving that far from their bed to their feeding area. Most of the time when they're on a strict feeding pattern during the rut, you throw all that out the window. But we're just talking about a slight variation from day to day where that buck's just getting up just a couple minutes earlier and making his way to that food source that might even be 100 yards or less from where he's bedding at. So I don't really pay much attention to those studies because I don't think they're really focusing on the deer that I'm hunting personally, for one. And for two, I've been following the moon for over 30 years. I shot my first 200-inch deer in 1999 and was following the moon guide back then. And I mean, I've focused on that every year since then and I've talked to thousands of people in the last 30 years about it. So, I mean, I don't want to brag, but I've got a pretty good wall of deer heads behind me in my office. And a lot of those deer were killed because of following the moon and the moon's impact. And I'm just saying that because, like I said, if you wanted to catch your first 50-inch muskie, not trying to change the subject, but if you wanted to catch your first 50-inch muskie, are you going to pay attention to some random study that was done by a university, or are you going to go talk to a guy that's got a wall full of 50-inch muskies that he's caught? I mean, right. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but that's really what it is. I mean, do you want to base everything on a study that's been done, or do you want to base it on somebody that has firsthand knowledge that's done it and made a living at doing it?
Yeah.
I mean, that, right. And I'm willing to talk to anybody. I answer every email personally that comes into Moon Guide, info@moonguide.com, if people are interested in it, if they don't understand it. I think everybody kind of feels and thinks that the moon has something to do with deer and deer movement, but they just don't understand it.
Oh, exactly.
And the reason that I bought the Moon Guide and took it over was because I had such great success with it. And Jeff, the original owner, who ended up passing away from leukemia, I talked to him about continuing his work after, what was going to happen with the Moon Guide after he passed, and told him that I wanted to continue it because I believed in it so much. I mean, it's helped me, and I enjoy helping other people, and would love to see other people be or enjoy the success that I've had by following it. And like I said, I'm not saying it's the end all beat all. It's just another tool to use, but you really need to be paying attention to it, just like anything else, because like I said, there's going to be days each month where the weather is going to trump everything, but there's a handful of days where that moon is going to as well. And you need to know when those days are each month. I mean, my biggest buck I've ever killed him the first week of November in Kansas, 85 degrees out. That deer was moving 2 hours before dark. There was no reason on God's green earth why that deer should have been up moving that early in that kind of heat. But I had the perfect wind, and it was on a red moon evening. And I've seen that happen consistently, whether it was myself or guys that I talk to that follow it. So it's another tool, but it is just as important as anything else. So why wouldn't you want to have, every tool that you can in your arsenal that's going to help you be more successful?
100%. Yeah. And like you said, with the studies, there's a lot of things, with those studies. There's certain things I'll be honest, I didn't even pay attention to, the moon phases when those deer were moving, things like that, because it was a different type of study that we were in. It was the predation study to see how many fawns things were getting killed, and, you'd find the collars. The other thing that I found, though, the most amazing part of the study for me was, how many of these, buck fawns would get kicked out, how far they would travel. If the mother was killed, though, that buck fawn would stay in that area, or the fawn would stay there. And so that was the part of study that I really enjoyed. What kind of timber stand improvement are they really hanging out in? Where are they? What food sources at what time of year? All these different things were the cool things with that study. And I think if you put those kind of studies together with, as you said, boots on the ground people like yourself that understand this, then I think it changes the whole thing. But again, just to look at a study and say, oh yeah, this is be all end all. No, it's not, because I've looked at some of those studies too, and I'm like, I don't know. From my experience, this isn't right. This isn't, and I'll take some of my in the woods experience way over what a study says, and you look at one example real quick is aging deer. They sit here and say, well, I'm going to look at its jaw and this, well, okay, look at its jaw and tell me what you think that deer is. And they're like, oh, I think it's a 2.5-year-old deer. Okay, well, what's it eating? What's it doing to wear those teeth down? What is the habitat like? So I think that they can be way off. So, we take our teeth and I send them out to Montana to get them cut and aged, to do it the right way. Again, it's very difficult for some of that, but a study says because of, the way we do this with teeth, the wildlife department say this is the correct way to age them. No, not really. So there's something to each process that has to be gone through, and just because somebody says one thing, it's not always correct. Look at the people with boots on the ground, look at all the studies, and then compare and say, okay, this makes a lot more sense than just looking at, okay, this is what they say it is in a what do I want to say, a product that's a development product, if you want to say that, like developing food. They say this is what it is. Well, 10 years later, they come out with something else because a farmer says this can't be done. And he's the one that's actually growing it and doing the work. But in a lab, they said, no, that's not possible. But yet it is. So sometimes, that boots on the ground is way ahead of the game.
Yeah. Yep. You cannot replace boots on the ground. I don't care how many studies you do.
No.
So, Adam, you've been using information about the moon and its impact on deer for decades. Tell us about the Moon Guide app and what people could expect from the app.
Yeah, sure. So back in the day when Jeff invented the Moon Guide, it was just available in the dial, which was like a slide chart basically, which we still have. Still have a big following for the dial. A lot of old school guys just like having the dial in their hands and using it. But a few years after we bought the company, I went to an app developer and basically laid everything out and told him what I wanted to do. But I wanted to get away from having to go to 4 different apps for everything that I wanted. Go into one app for landowner data, parcel information, go into a different app for weather information, go into the Moon Guide app for the red moon information, and really created this app so that it had everything in it that I personally wanted to have all in one stop. So it's got the red moon information. It gives you every month the red moon days, which are going to be your best days when that red moon is peaking at prime time in the evenings. It's going to give you the 2 peak activity times every day, which is your overhead and underfoot. So it's going to give you the best days. It's going to give you the best times every day. And then it's also going to give you the best location for those times. So if you have a day where the moon, overhead or underfoot moon, peaks in the middle of the day, you might want to think twice about your typical morning or evening hunts and focus on that window from 10 to 2 in the middle of the day, because that's when deer are going to be active. But you also need to adjust where you're hunting, because those deer moving at the middle of the day doesn't mean those deer are going to be out in the fields moving necessarily. You're probably going to be better off hunting back in the timber, closer to the bedding area, so that you can take advantage of that midday movement. So it's kind of universal, whether you're hunting field edges and food sources, you're hunting bedding areas, or you're hunting transition areas in between the two. But we basically give you one of those 3 depending on when those moons are peaking every day. So best days, best times every day, and the hunting locations. Then we've also got our weather page, which has something brand new this year, which is our wind mapping, which I think is probably the best wind forecasting available anywhere with our new wind particle mapping. So you're not going to a weather page to see what the wind is doing. You're actually looking at an aerial view of your farm, and you can see the wind particles on that map. And if you there's a button on the bottom that will show you what those particles are doing in the next 24 hours. So you hit that button and it'll speed up those particles, and you can see how they shift throughout the day, which direction that they're going, and actually right there on your farm where your stand is, what that wind is going to be doing for the next 24 hours. I think it's the best wind mapping available. And to me, other than the moon information, the wind's the most important feature that most people are looking at. And I went to my developer and I said, we need the best wind mapping available, and this is what they came up with. And I've not seen anything better anywhere. So you get the wind mapping, you get an hourly and a 10-day forecast. It's got radar. I mean, it's got all the weather information you need, barometric pressure, the whole 9 yards. And then we've got, our Hunter's Journal, which might be best kept secret on the Moon Guide app. Because have you ever gone and looked at your trail camera photos, whether you're out in the woods looking at photos from the last couple of weeks, or you want to go back and look at historical photos from, say, last season? You're trying to put together a pattern. What's this deer doing when he shows up in daylight on the farm? What was the weather doing last year on October 17th? What was the wind doing? What was the moon information that day? What was the barometric pressure that day? Try to go to Google and get that information from a year ago. It's next to impossible. But in the journal, you can create a journal entry for a specific location for your favorite farm where you're hunting, or a specific stand site. You can upload that trail camera picture to that journal entry. And when you save that entry, add some notes to it, whatever information you want to save. When you save it, it takes a snapshot of all that information right there in the journal entry. So whether it was 2 days or 2 years ago, what the wind was doing that day in that specific location, what the barometric pressure was, what the moon information was, everything, all that vital information that you need to put together a pattern on that animal, it's all right there for you instantly. So the calendar, the red moon calendar, the weather mapping, the wind mapping, the journal, there's a page that's got a ton of great exclusive discounts from some of the best companies in the hunting industry. We've got exclusive discounts, which you use any one of those, it's going to pay for the app for the year. We've got a section that's called the Rub, which is kind of like I guess you'd say it's kind of like Moon Guide's Facebook page, where subscribers can post a picture of their kill, comment about what's going on in their area. It's a great way to keep up with, what's happening throughout the season, and share that information. And then there's also a page of predictions where I actually go through the entire season week by week and tell people, what's going on with the moon. What's a great strategy for that time of the year? Where do you need to be hunting at? What you can expect to see? And then in the rut, I do the exact same thing, but break it down day by day, based on not only the moon, but a lot of information that has been consistently accurate over the years that, people like Charles Alzheimer have put together their rut predictions, everything based on, when the autumn equinox hits, the second full moon after that, which triggers breeding, when that peak breeding should be happening, and just basically a day-by-day forecast of what the deer should be doing and what you should be doing, to take advantage of the rut and the different phases of the rut. I mean, the rut is such a difficult time to hunt. I mean, there's more giant deer killed every year in November than any time else, but it's different every year, and it's very difficult to say, what's going on. Are they chasing? Are they seeking? Are they locked down? When I threw all that information out the window and I just strictly started focusing on peak activity times during the day and when's my best chance to be in the woods that deer are going to be active, that's when I really started having really good luck in November. So all of that's in there. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I mean, it's like I said, it's basically a one-stop shop as far as your app goes. And the mapping. So, we're never going to be able to compete with OnX as far as mapping goes, but we have everything in there that I really think that I need personally, that most guys are going to want to have, our nationwide parcel data. Most of our competitors offer you one state for, more than what we charge for the entire country. You get nationwide parcel data for every state for $24.99, and that's included in the app. And you're not going to find a price better than that anywhere. And like I said, most competitors charge more than that for just one or two states. And then as far as our mapping goes, you can pull up that parcel data. You can mark the property lines. You can put waypoints on your maps for stand locations, camera locations. You can measure your food plots if you need to know how big a food plot is to determine how much fertilizer or how much seeds you need. You can measure distances. I mean, it's got everything on there that you could possibly need as far as mapping goes, and being able to log information on those maps as well. So I don't know what more it could offer. Like I said, we're not going to ever compete with OnX mapping, but we have everything a guy needs, in this app as far as everything that I covered goes. I don't know what else we could offer that, that I or anybody else personally would need when it comes to hunting. So.
Right.
I love that it's all in one place. I love those things, like you said, instead of having to check different apps for the weather, different apps for the different, components of the moon activity, and then to add the mapping on top too. But
yeah, and a lot of apps are very confusing to use, and we've tried to make it as easy as possible. It's not confusing. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of information in there, but really, it's super simple to use. And I wanted to offer all your listeners a special offer. We're going to do a introductory offer for everybody that's listening. So for the last 3 days of October, we're going to offer 40% off. You don't need a code. Just go to the App Store or Google Play and download the app. And like I said, it's normally $24.99 a year. We're taking 40% off for your listeners, so it's, I believe, $14.99 comes out to $14.99 for the first year. So
awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate
absolutely.
that.
That's a great deal.
And like you guys said,
inviting me onto the podcast today.
Yeah, and like you said, for everything, Michelle, everything in one place, it beats what I'm doing now and naming all my deer. And then every year, going back year after year and going, okay, now I have them from this date to this date, these 5 days, where are these deer, and trying to figure that out. And hope it made it through the year and that it's still there if that's the deer you want to target and try to hunt, where this, condenses all that and makes life a lot easier to plan that and figure that out. And, with everything, with weather, with, the moon guide and that stuff. So I know, tonight while I'm sitting in a tree playing camera person for Michelle, she will be, I'm sure, running through this stuff and telling me what I'm doing wrong, according to the moon guide, and how to fix it.
I said it's mostly doing wrong, but yeah. Oh, like you said, I'm kind of a science nerd too, so it's one of those things that's going to be very intriguing to me, no doubt.
Yeah, well, I'll be interested to find out when you start comparing those dates of when you guys have killed your best animals, or when you've finally gotten daylight pictures of those stubborn nocturnal bucks, and when you start comparing it to the red moon dates and how it lines up. I'll be really interested to see what you guys find out.
Yeah, we'll let you know for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for being on, Adam. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me, and I hope that you and all your listeners have a safe and successful season.
And
thanks. You
too.
Also. And for all the listeners out there, be sure to check out the Moon Guide app and take advantage of that special deal and own the season.
Follow Own the Season Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening.
Check back weekly for new episodes.